Today I'm giving a lesson on Napoleon. We're going to start Napoleon today. And this PowerPoint is on Schoology, but it contains three kind of parts, part 1, 2, and 3. And today I am going to talk about part 1, which is Napoleon's rise to power. And then there'll be a second video about his government reforms, and then a third video about his fall from power. So today I'm just going to teach the beginning, his rise to power. To start, I want to just talk about a little bit about his background, who he was, where he was born, how he comes to prominence in the military. So he was born in 1769 on this small island in the Mediterranean. It wasn't even on mainland France, and he was born, but it was owned by France. So he was a French citizen, kind of like Hawaii. It's disconnected continentally from the United States, but is still a part of the U.S. Same with Alaska, etc. So he was born on Corsica, this island, and then he was born to a minor noble family. So they had prominence and wealth, but they weren't very super rich or anything like that. But it was customary for a lot of the males in his family to go to military school and then join the military, eventually become soldiers, etc. So at age 9, he was sent to mainland France to go to a military academy, essentially. And as soon as he got there, it was very clear that he was very good. He was a very good student. He had a brilliant military mind for tactic and technique. He was good with weaponry. He was just at the top of his class from the very beginning. And so he kind of rose in the ranks pretty quickly. When he was 20 years old, the French Revolution broke out in 1789. And so he is then a soldier in the French military. And as you know, war broke out in France, or France declared war on all of Europe, as I covered in the French Revolution, in 1792-ish. And so France, by the time he's a soldier, a lieutenant, France was at war versus all of Europe. Excuse me. In 1793, as a lieutenant, he had a very, very prominent, famous victory over Britain and Austria in the midst of this war, after France had been losing, in the beginning, a lot. But this victory kind of really propels him to fame in France. And it would not be long after that where he's named the full commander of the French military, and then eventually the general of the entire French military. So big, big deal. He is extremely famous. And so he kind of starts turning the tide to the French victories in their war, whereas previously, through the last year or two, they had been losing. Fast forward to 1798, he had been getting all these victories. He never lost. He hadn't had a single loss for 4 years. Fast forward to 1798, he is in Egypt. He went to Egypt as the commander of the military. He had a huge battalion there. He had a bunch of soldiers under him. And I wanted to show this map. I want to pause on this slide for a second so that you guys can get a visual. So here's France, obviously. Here's where he was born, Corsica. Here's Egypt down here. You guys are studying this European map. The reason he was in Egypt is because, remember, France is at war against Britain, all of Europe, but Britain, obviously, primarily. And Britain often traveled through Egypt, around the Mediterranean, and then through Egypt, and then through the Red Sea to get over to their kind of colony, non-official colony yet, but it will be, India. They did a lot of trade with India. And so the British military was going through Egypt. So he went with his soldiers and battalions to Egypt to disrupt the British trade route with India. So that's why he was there. Okay, so back to this. Oops, sorry, my bad. So while he was in Egypt, he lost. He suffered a huge loss, and this was extremely embarrassing for him. He was not used to losing, and so what ends up happening is he basically runs away. This is also very indicative, like I said, of his character. So he, instead of staying, if I was with you, I would, do this whole discussion, for those of you who are athletes in the room, if you had a really bad loss, you had this game against this rival and you're battling, you lost. What would a good coach do, right? They'd bring you back to the locker room, they'd sit you down, they'd be like, listen guys, that stunk, but we're back at it tomorrow. We'll get back in the gym or the court or the field, practice more, we'll get out there, we'll get them next time, we need to regroup, we're still strong, there's a bigger picture here, yada yada. But what would a bad coach do? Maybe yell at you, maybe scream at you, maybe do nothing. Maybe the worst coach would just leave the gym field or court. They would just be like, I'm out. You guys figure it out. You guys stink. I'm embarrassed. I'm done. I'm not. Maybe he doesn't even ever come back. Or maybe he just goes home and you show up to practice next day. You're like, what do? I don't know. What is this? Napoleon, after he lost, he was so obsessed with his reputation and how people would view him back in France that he left his troops there. They literally woke up the next day. They were like, where's Napoleon? Like, have you seen Napoleon? Have you seen Napoleon? No, I don't know. And they didn't know where he went. So he, goes back to France, and he the whole time is like ruminating. He's like, what are they going to, they're going to hate me. They're going to kick me out. They're not going to want me to be the commander anymore. What are we going to do? Like, I don't know. I just want to restore my, loss. I want to restore my lost glory, yada, yada. He's like all in his head. Like, he gets back to Paris, and they are having a parade for him, a huge demonstration. They're celebrating, singing songs about him. They're like worshiping it. They're like, oh, Napoleon's here. And he is like, looks like, the people still think the same of me, whatever. So long story short, he gets back. No one had heard about it. It wasn't the day of modern media, So he beats the news home. He leaves Egypt to beat the news home back to France, and he does that successfully. Gets back to France, and he has a meeting with those two directors that I talked to you about previously, with his brother, Joseph Bonaparte, who's one of those 5 directors, and the other guy, Abbé Sieyès. And they're like, listen, Napoleon, we have an idea. The whole military basically does whatever you say. We can't stand the type of government. We can't stand these other 3 directors. Like, we want to overthrow them. With your help, we can. So what do you think if the 3 of us go together, we overthrow the directory, and then we just set up a new government? And Napoleon's like, psh, I'm in. So what they do in 1799 is they stage, and your book references this, I don't have it in the PowerPoint, but they stage what's called a coup d'etat, COUPD-ETAT. It looks like coup d'état, but it's a French word. It's pronounced coup d'etat. Coup d'etat means an overthrow, a bloodless overthrow of government by a few people. And that's what happened. So Napoleon, Joseph, and Abbé Sieyès basically show up to the directory. Again, 3 other directors and 750 guys. Napoleon shows up basically with the entire military behind him, and he's like, all right, we are now going to be the government. And the directors and the Council of Elders, Council of 500 are like, no, like, what do you mean? Like, no, we're the government. We already decided this. We've been the government. And he's like, no. And they're like, yeah. He's like, no. They're like, yeah. He's like, do you see my army? And like, this could go one of 2 ways. Bloodless, and you guys just leave peacefully, and then we're the new government. Or this. Here's the military. They'll do what I say. So basically the directory, all of them, were like, all right, we're out. That makes sense. So at that point, in 1799, Napoleon, Abbé Sieyès, and Joseph Bonaparte overthrow the directory, and they set up by 1800 a 3-man consulate. This word should ring a bell from Roman times when you studied that, probably in 6th grade, I'm guessing. So they set up this 3-man consulate where they ruled. They didn't want to call it the directory. They didn't want to have any ties to the old ways or the old monarch. So they set this up, knowing what you know about Napoleon. He's not one that likes to share power. So 2 years later, by 1802, he sets himself up as single consul for life. And he tells Abbé Sieyès and Joseph Bonaparte, like, listen, you're going to have prominent cabinet positions in my government. I have stuff for you. Don't worry. I have a bigger plan. And they were okay with that. And so they continue to be buddies. This image right here is probably the single image that is most indicative of Napoleon's character. Let me explain this really quickly, because I will reference this multiple times throughout the course. This is a drawing, a rendering by David of Napoleon's coronation ceremony. A coronation ceremony is like an induction whenever you become king or emperor. It was very common in all of Europe. So what was also very common at coronation ceremonies is the Pope, which is this guy right here. The Pope is the head of the Catholic Church. He is always invited to crowning ceremonies. It is like, a way to say, like, I bless this crowning, I bless this kingship or this monarchy or this emperorship or whatever. So he's invited to this ceremony, and it's customary that the Pope comes and the Pope gets the crown and the Pope crowns the new king. Okay, that's what happens. Napoleon invites the Pope. And then when it's time for the Pope to get the crown, he gets the crown and it's time to crown Napoleon. Napoleon literally is like, never mind, takes the crown from the Pope. And it's like, I got it, no worries, crowns himself. He literally takes the crown from the Pope. This has never happened in history. And then crowns himself. He's like, I got it. Then he takes the other crown for his wife, the queen, or eventually empress, and he crowns his wife, Josephine. The Pope would always have done this as well. This is unheard of. Everyone was like, okay. If we were together, I'd ask, like, why do you think Napoleon would have even invited the Pope then if he planned to just crown himself? And the answer is to demonstrate Napoleon's absolute authority, to say, like, this is mine. Like, I'm responsible for this. I don't need to be blessed or, anointed by the Pope. This is me. I did this. I'm going to continue ruling by myself. So sit down. And so it kind of made a statement. So I just wanted to talk about this for a second. The crowning ceremony is crazy. 2 years later, after he crowns himself consul for life, literally himself, he names himself emperor. If we were together, I'd ask you, like, what does this word emperor mean? Its root word is empire. Empire means a group of many states together. So this was kind of a foreshadowing of what Napoleon had planned for France, to take over many states and create his own Napoleonic empire. I will start talking a little bit about this tomorrow. He also took this word emperor because he did not want to be tied to the word king or anything affiliated with the old monarch or the old ways. He wanted this to be a new crowning, a new word, a new way, a new path. Okay, so that's what he does. So he crowns himself, and by 1804, he is the Emperor of France. The next lesson will be his governmental reforms once emperor, and I will teach that next. Talk to you later. Bye.